Hey, HTDA, and today we're playing some more Mindustry, and this time around it's time for the nuclear production complex. I've been able to play this level for a very long time, but I just didn't get around to it because we did other stuff. Now, based on the comments on some of the previous episodes, I am a little bit worried about how hard this level is going to be, but I guess we're about to find out. It's also worth noting that for the first time ever, the facility we captured last time around is actually under attack from two zones, and two of these kind of like random zones, the non-official levels, at least that's what I think these are. Not entirely sure if we're actually going to be attacked for a change then, but again, we're going to find out. Now, once again, I'm going to launch from the tar fields because we have all the different materials we need over here, including thorium and a decent amount of phase fabric and surge alloy now. I'm hoping to find another zone where we can produce some more of that because, again, this production is really pitiful. As I am about to launch into the new level, I actually noticed something strange that didn't occur to me before. So it seems that for some resources we can bring a larger amount than others, but I'm failing to see the consistency here. So for example, we can apparently only bring 6,500 pyritite, but we can bring almost double that amount, well, more than double that amount actually, of some of these base resources. Now that might make sense because bringing base resources might just be more generous, I don't know. But then it comes to other things, like for example silicon, that we can also bring in large amounts. Yeah, so there's a logic here going on that I'm not entirely sure how that works. But anyway, it's a moot point because we have plenty of resources. So let's just launch into the new level. And so it's an icy level. Well, let's pause and let's take a look around. I've been looking around the map a little bit, and the longer I look at it, the happier I'm becoming. Well, first of all, we have thorium on this map. Not just one zone over here with some thorium, but we have a secondary zone over here that has quite a bit of it, actually. So we can make thorium and we can make phase fabric in this level if we want to. On top of that, just to make my life easy, we have some of these thermal vents, so we can use free power, basically. It's not going to be a massive amount, but there's a zone here, a zone here. I think that's it. But yeah, that just means we have some easy power going, although power is not typically the biggest problem anyway, but still, it's nice. And most importantly, we have a lot of open space to build, so we can maybe look into making some new pretty looking designs. This being eradication might mean we don't necessarily have the time for that, but again, we'll see. The enemy is going to spawn over here, which also is actually a little bit challenging because depending on where the air units spawn, they might just fly like right through the edge of the map to my base over here. That means that I'm probably going to have to set up some air defense here, maybe some more here-ish, and we also definitely need air defense over here just in case the enemy flies in like that. Maybe even in the entire corner over here. It's just a little unpredictable sometimes where the air units are going to go for, so that is something to take into consideration. However, we can set up a nice block of defense over here with a lot of turrets, and as long as we stay under this ridge, so we can pretty much fill up this entire area with turrets, I think we should be fine. The long-range units don't really reach to the sun. I mean, I guess they do a little bit, but I'm not entirely sure that it makes a lot of sense to build a lot of ripples over here. So I'm probably just going to stick to air defense. Now, there are a lot of these relics over here. Most of them don't seem particularly useful. I mean, the laser drills over here, I guess we could restore, but yeah, I definitely don't want anti-air defense over here. I'm not sure what this is supposed to be. Long story short, we're going to have to do a lot of cleanup, especially this stuff over here. I'm not entirely sure what's going on. Anyway, time to get started. Okay, it seems I still don't completely understand how this attack mechanic works, because last time I checked, when the previous level actually got under attack almost straight away after I booted up this particular level, it showed me that the facility was going to survive 10 out of 10 attacks, or 10 out of 10 waves, I should say. When I just loaded up the game again to resume recording and I checked this level, it now says we're going to survive 0 out of 4 waves. So I guess I am going to have to deal with this. It also seems I must have missed a couple of warnings because apparently we are on wave 31 out of 35. Now, I don't know about you, but it looks like I'm doing just fine surviving this wave. So I'm not entirely sure what the problem is, but if I just need to sit here and click through these waves, then I guess that's what I'll do. Now, this actually highlights a problem I want to fix in the current level, so I promise this all is irrelevant. As you can see, it takes my turrets quite a while to actually fill up on the Pyrite again. Now, it's fine, as you can see, so everything is filled up by the time the new wave comes in, but there is a moment where the waves are kind of just depleting my turrets of ammunition. The ammunition is of course constantly being refilled, but still that is going to be a problem at some point when we get more heavy waves that we can't actually sit through long enough. Now hopefully this wave will show, and there's no reloading in this game, so if this goes wrong I can't reload and pretend everything was alright. But yeah, as you can see, I'm doing just fine, but these turrets are slowly getting drained out of resources, and even though the ones in the back are getting refilled, it takes a little while, so I want to kind of redesign my defense in the main base in the current level that we're trying to complete. Now, in the meanwhile, I'll just see if I can actually complete this level, so I don't have to look at this all over again. And the sector is safe again. Now, I did actually add in a couple of turrets over here in the corner, because I realized I might as well do that, because I have plenty of power to spare. And I did the same over here, although I don't think these turrets did a lot of things. As you can see, these turrets actually did do some damage because they're turned, but these are never going to be in range of units unless they get very close to my wall. Anyway, back to the actual level that we're trying to complete. Oh, okay, well apparently in the few minutes I spent in the other level actively trying to defend it, we lost the level I was trying to complete. Not that we did much in that level, but okay, this is an interesting mechanic and honestly a little bit frustrating. But hopefully this level will now take care of itself for long enough that we can actually complete this one. If that is not the case, I am just going to have to take out these random zones and hopefully fix it through that. Mommy, I'm home! Okay, so like I said, we're going to set up a defense, and specifically I want to see if we can set up a defense using some of the new towers. And explicitly, I am looking at the Meltdown, because this looks like a very interesting tower. First of all, it just needs power, so we don't need to do all the Pyrite stuff. If we have enough power, this works. At the same time, if we don't have enough power, this doesn't do anything at all, so that is a problem. But we can boost it with cryo fluid as well. Cryo fluid is relatively simple to make, so cryo fluid along with power is everything we need in order to make this thing function. Now, this is a very expensive tower, but it also does a massive amount of damage. So, is this a good way to approach this? I don't know. We're about to find out. Okay, so here's the plan. I'm going to kickstart my production with just a couple of these pneumatic drills that don't actually need power, attached with some combustion generators that will supply a minimal amount of power, and I'm gonna hook them up to batteries so that all of this tiny little production of power is actually adding up. Then I'm going to use that tiny little bit of power to kickstart my laser drill mining some sand, as well as some thorium, and the thorium is going to go into a phase weaver to start producing a tiny little bit of phase fabric. Okay, and as you can see, next on the list are some RTG generators. Now, this is really just me experimenting, so I'm not sure if this is going to be a viable tactic because there are some troubles, but the main thing that I'm trying to do over here is that the phase weavers are going to be producing 0.5 phase fabric per second, so I should have enough production to actually do this efficiently. Now, 0.5 per second doesn't sound like a lot, but if you check out the RTG generators, we only need 0.004 per second in order to fuel this thing with phase fabric. That means I can fire up over 100 of these RTG generators with a single phase fabric production unit. Now, there is a downside to that, because these things are not necessarily very efficient. They take 270 power per unit, or they produce 270 power per second by default, but it's only going to be functioning at 60% efficiency, so that's about 150 power if I fuel them by phase fabric. So I'm gonna need a boatload of these to actually power my base if I want to use that. Is this a smart way of doing things? I don't know. We're going to find out. Okay, there we go. So I have a couple of these up and running now. It does take quite a while to build them, actually, which is something that you should take into consideration considering the timing you have until the first attack. But the Phase Weaver is up and running. We have 3 of these powered up now. It seems that they're producing 270 per minute, but they're actually not. They should be going down to 162 apparently per minute, per second I should say. But that is still going to add up to about 600, 700 power. Now, honestly, looking at this and realizing that that's going to be 700 power, given the amount of stuff I put into this to build one of these, or 4 of these I should say, that is not very impressive. So I might want to look into the second option, the thorium reactor, which uses cryofluid and thorium to produce 900 per second. Now there is a problem with this thing as well, because this thing is actually going to explode if there is not enough coolant going into the system. So each of these solutions, these more high-tech solutions, have drawbacks, but it's worth trying to figure out what works without trying to look it up with some guy, because obviously there's a right answer to this, but I'm going in blind and trying to figure this out for myself. In the meanwhile, I am storing up some power in these large batteries because I'm not really using any more power than I need. So what I'm going to do is I am going to build a couple of these meltdowns to see their effectiveness and put just a couple of them on the front line. And hopefully that will be enough to clear a couple of waves and get some more power production and some other material production going as well. Holy macaroni, I did not realize how large these things are. These things are 4 blocks by 4 blocks, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, and that is actually massively large compared to anything else that we've been building so far. But anyway, let's put them up and see how that works. Oh, and as a side note, thank you to all in the comments that pointed out to me that different walls actually have different ways of protecting your enemies. So I didn't really realize that the higher tier walls did additional things on top of just like taking damage. So the Plastinian wall in particular absorbs lasers, which was one of the reasons I lost one of the previous levels, and electronic arcs, and also blocks automatic power connections. So yeah, that's interesting. If you look at some of the other walls, for example, thorium, and that's just a straight up wall. But then if you look at the surge alloy wall, that's actually going to release electric arcs upon contact. So depending on what you want to achieve with your walls, you can use different types. The phase wall, I think, also does something that it deflects enemy projectiles. So the way I'm thinking now is maybe use phase walls in the front, reflect some projectiles, and then have the Plastinian walls in the back to make sure lasers don't come through. Something along those lines. I'm not entirely sure, but either way, there's some experimenting we can do with those as well. Another thing I didn't realize is that these things take forever to build, and that's going to speed up significantly once I have more polys flying around. But giving the first timer on eradication, that is easier said than done. Well, on the bright side, that actually meant I didn't get to do anything else than build a couple of meltdowns before the first wave. So we're about to find out what these things actually do, because I haven't seen them in action. Now, obviously, the first wave is nothing really impressive. Move on with it yet, because I have a base to build up, but I want to show people. Yeah? Are you actually going to shoot? Or are you not shooting? Hold on, what did I miss? Alright, requires coolant to operate, which of course I did not supply just yet. Okay, a rookie mistake. Okay, let's build some emergency towers to hopefully take care of the enemy. Please build the thing that I actually need to stay alive, please. Thank you. Guys, I'm not sure where this guy is going, but obviously it's not helping if you're shooting at the wrong direction. But I think that should take care of him. Is he gone? Yeah, he is gone. Okay, so never mind me going in panic mode, building an impulse pump to actually supply a lot of water. All the water I'm actually going to need for a moment over here. And now we do have the meltdowns powered by water, and we should have the enemy coming in a couple of seconds. I'm just going to speed that up for a moment. It's not going to be too impressive, but at least we can see what these things actually... Okay, then. Yeah, that works. That's definitely effective. I have a feeling we can do with just a couple of these for the moment. Now, of course, having giant lasers fire at the enemy is nice and all, but they are actually consuming quite a bit of power, and like you just saw, the RTG generators are not producing much of that. So I am leaning towards maybe getting some cryofluid going so we can utilize that thorium to produce some thorium reactor power instead. So how about this? I just put up a small laser drill for some titanium. I put up a cryofluid mixer along with some storage to make, well, cryofluids. And I am mining some more thorium, and I can put all of that into a thorium reactor. Now, all of this is already going to supply me with twice as much power as this setup over here, not counting the parts that I'm still trying to build. In fact, it is going to produce exactly the same amount of power, gross, I should say, as this entire setup over here. However, the phase weaver itself costs 300 power. So actually, the net result of all of this is about 600 power at the moment, for a lot more cost than it took me to set up this, because the thorium reactor is relatively cheap. It does cost a lot of resources in terms of numbers, but these are relatively easy to get resources. And I actually can build 5 more thorium reactors with just this setup, so I can replicate this very easily. All in all, I guess the conclusion between these two new types of power is that if you have time, resources, and space to spare, then I think the RTG generators are the clear winners in the long run. However, the thorium reactor is a lot quicker to set up, a lot more efficient in terms of build times, etc., especially in terms of building space. So, yeah, there's different uses for different types of power, and of course I could be using the thermal power as well, but I wanted to play around with my new stuff for a moment. But all in all, I am pretty happy with the thorium generators. Now, I'm also trying to redesign a couple of my layouts a little bit more, that they are scalable, tideable. So as you can see, if I just pick this up, I can just place it right next to here, and I can double up my power with the exact same layout that I've been using so far. In fact, I can power up a total of 5 thorium reactors with just a little bit more than this single laser drill, so I had to add in a second one, but all of that should function off a single cryo fluid mixer. Now, if I really want, I redesigned this a little bit, I should probably duplicate this just to make sure I have enough, but in theory this is producing 12 and this is consuming 12 cryo fluids, so as long as there's no drop in power, everything should be working like intended. Between those 5 thorium generators, I have plenty of power, and adding in a couple of batteries to that mix, I can store up even more, so as long as I'm not dropping too low, that should be fine. Let's trigger another wave and see how bad of damage these 3 are going to do. Well, 2 of these are not going to do anything, because then once again I cannot actually power them with coolant. Okay, guys, stop yelling at me in the comments already. I just duplicated the cryofluid mixer setup here once more. I am now exporting some of that cryofluid in the same pipeline I was actually using for the water before. It will take a minute for this water to clear out, but it is actually fueling my meltdowns. So that means that all I now need to do is just connect these pipelines, and then I have 4 of these defending. I did put up a little bit of a wall over here, so I can now more easily fire at the enemy. Now, honestly, the angle at which the enemy is coming in compared to where these things are is not ideal. So I probably want to set up another couple of these and then connect them up something like this. I love how messy this level is, by the way, with random towers that I just built in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, we're just going to need to get the hang of how these new playthings actually work. Okay, that is 6 meltdowns up and running, and a lot of lessons learned along the way. Now, I'm running really low on some of the basic resources, especially copper, as you can see. So it is going to have to do for a moment while I actually start building up a base. And in case you're wondering, yes, I am very well aware that this meltdown is quite vulnerable, actually, in terms of where I positioned it and where the enemy is coming from, but it'll just have to do. Okay, so that is some titanium, copper, and lead coming in. All of these patches are relatively small, but we do have a very diverse amount of different resources very close to my base, so at least that is nice. And as usual, next on the list is silicon, because we need boatloads of that. And I did redesign my layout a little bit for that, because I found out, or I actually noticed from some of you in the comments, that you can use an unloader between buildings as well. And that's actually super useful to make things more compact, because I hate it the way my layout for the crucible looks like. So the way I'm doing it now, I am producing some sand, coal, and lead still. It's all being nicely funneled in from the same side. Half of that is going to go into my pyrite mixer, and then I'm unloading some of that coal and sand into my silicon crucible that is also receiving that. And of course there's a secondary belt going out that is then going to supply the actual pyrite into my crucible. And then it should be spitting out in any moment from now the actual silicon that I'm producing over here, but you can already see it functioning. Now the nice thing about this is completely tileable. It's fairly compact as far as a layout like this can be compact. You might notice that I'm actually producing sand from these pulverizers that I've never used before, because as I was building this, I realized I have no sand near here. I thought this was sand. It is not. So I can't actually produce any sand in this level, with the exception of the little beach we had over here. But this is literally, I think, the only place on the map that has sand. Even these darker places over here, none of that is actually sand that I can drill up. So yeah, I'm going to have to turn some scrap into sand the hard way. Okay, another lesson learned. You cannot put a lot of those routers in a row. I already knew that, but for some reason I still thought it might work. But no, it doesn't, so I needed to split those pulverizers up a little bit so I can actually get enough sand production. Oh look, the one thing I was afraid of already happened. A couple of those units got through and they are attacking my base from the air. And honestly, it probably has everything to do with the fact that these meltdowns don't have a massive range to the side. So I'm going to add some air defense as well. I should probably be able to take out these last few remaining units just by adding some scatters. But that's not going to hold it in the long run. But anyway, you might have noticed the presence of some mass drivers now, because that's the kind of people we are from this point on. I am going to try to use these mass drivers as much as possible to avoid all the spaghetti that we've seen before, because there are so many types of resources and so many resources actually want to get in and out of my base that otherwise it's going to get messy really, really fast. And boy, I just made the mistake of checking the world map. Am I really going to have to conquer 4 random zones just to make sure my nuclear production complex is no longer under attack? I am actually not sure I want to do that, but we're going to have to see if this is actually required. Now, the interesting thing is, it actually says I'm just going to survive all the waves? Already? Really? I mean, I just built a couple of towers. That seems very unlikely. If I now leave the level, it will just complete itself. But yeah, just to make sure, let's just keep building. Then I'm going to add some thorium to the mix, as well as a phase weaver for good measure. Now I am going to leach off the remaining sand I have on this belt, but I'm prioritizing the silicon because, as you can see, that is my main bottleneck for the moment. But yeah, this covers pretty much all the basics, but I definitely need a lot more silicon, especially considering I want to start producing units. The very nice thing I like about these mass drivers is that it makes it so much easier to just use those resources that are far away on the map. So for example, you can see over here, I just built another couple of these silicon crucibles and a multipress for some additional graphite. Brought in some sand, coal, and lead. I'm literally on the other side of the map, and all I needed to do was build 1, 2, 3, I think it's 4. Yeah, 4 of these mass drivers, and I'm feeding into the same one that I actually was using before as well, because this drains out really, really fast. And that is all I need to basically double up on my silicon production. So now I should have 2 full belts of silicon coming in, about a belt of graphite as well, of various resources leftovers from what I'm doing over here. Yeah, I can easily add in some more titanium, but the other thing that I'm currently missing that is going to be important in the long run is some surge alloy. Surge alloy is, I think, one of those resources that it's really easy to overdo. And what I mean by that is that you don't need that much surge alloy, at least, well, you do want a fair amount, but you're bringing in to the level a fair amount already. And you definitely also don't want to mass produce this, because it's going to cost you a massive amount of silicon. So you can, of course, scale up your silicon production to kind of offset that a little bit, and you probably should, at least to some extent. But long story short, it is something that I'm going to be very careful about scaling up. So initially, I think I'm just going to have 1 single surge smelter. And that one is just going to sit here in the corner, slowly drawing all the resources it needs from the unloader and loading it straight back into the main base. And that's it. I can easily scale this up if I want to, but until I do, this is just going to work fine and make sure I'm actually getting a little bit of that coming in. The same kind of holds for this phase weaver over here. It is far from efficient at the moment, but I don't care. I don't need a massive amount of phase fabric coming in, but just having some production is better than having no production at all. I also just realized I haven't really looked at my defenses in about, well, 8 waves or so, and it's been just fine. I didn't even actually notice that I've been under attack. So these meltdowns are actually working very well at the moment. I have no doubt that I'm going to be in a lot of trouble at some point. This is definitely not going to be enough for the long run. At least I'm expecting it not to be. But it is impressive that these six meltdowns are holding off everything without any issue whatsoever. All of that said, we do need to be very careful about our power production, so I'm gonna make sure I boost that up a little bit by using some thorium power and probably also using this thermal patch over here, because that is pretty much just free stuff. Okay, now speaking of overdoing things, I now have way more power than I probably need and probably should have built right now, but just taking advantage of all these thermals was a little bit too convenient to pass up, and the same kind of held for all of this production. For the thorium reactors, I am really enjoying these, by the way, way better than the RTG reactors. I should probably delete these, by the way, because that doesn't make any sense. Speaking of which, it probably does make sense that I'm going to start collecting some of the face weaving that I'm doing over here, because that is just wasted production. Okay, next on the list, let's start working on a little bit of plastinium production. That is going to require quite a bit of water, but we have plenty of that thanks to these impulse pumps now. And that should take care of my ammunition I'm going to need for my anti-air, as well as just building a lot of other stuff. It does feel that this map is taking into account a little bit that this is supposed to be done earlier in the game, maybe, because these waves, until wave 14 at least, are kind of pitiful compared to what I've been used to so far. So I'm not complaining, I like pitiful waves, but I definitely didn't need 6 of these meltdowns to handle them. Okay, this line of cyclones should stop any incoming, well, air units, hopefully from this angle, along with these parallaxes that I added in, just because I haven't really seen that many air units coming in from those angles, but you know, you can never be too safe. And as you can see, the size of the waves is definitely increasing, so I am going to need more firepower as we go on. Now, I actually want to try out a new type of turret as well. We have the segment, which is going to intercept incoming projectiles. Laser projectiles are not targeted. I'm not sure that lasers count as projectiles to begin with, but yeah. Just maybe adding a couple of these over here might help with some of those long-range units that you just saw incoming. In the meanwhile, I'll add some more plastinium production to my base, along with some additional titanium strip production, just because I can. And when I say to my base, I mean to the pipeline mass driver pipeline, if you can call it that. That is going into my main base. Now, actually, I've built everything that I need, I think, with the exception of something that is actually not important, namely metaglass. So I am going to need glass and some more of that lead for that. And honestly, I am getting a little bit annoyed by this map, because even though it has a lot of resources, those resources tend to come in relatively small patches, and the fact that there is no sand on the map is just a tad annoying. However, we can deal with it, and I will, and I'm going to get myself some metaglass. Okay, there we go. We have some metaglass production as well, a secondary pipeline, driveway, mass driver, whatever. And look at that, I now have 2 of these mass drivers receiving items as well, just to make sure that there's no bottlenecks. Now, let me check. We have copper, we have a lot of lead, we have metaglass, we have graphite, we have... Yep, I think that is everything we are going to need. I'm actually not producing pyrite at all, and I'm also not producing the blast compound we can make from that. Well, technically that is not true. We are producing pyrite, but we're just using it to make silicon. I don't have any dedicated production for this other than that. The reason for that is I want to specifically try if I can do without. It's probably better to have some blast compound or some pyrite to add some ripples to the mix of my defensive line over here. But I want to see how far I can drive this, at least initially, without having to build even more pyrite, because we've built so much of that already in the last couple of episodes. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in another one of those lines of cyclones on the south end of my, well, I guess it's on the north of my base, but on the south direction of the enemy incoming waves, because I've noticed some air units going in this direction and some air units going in that direction. Just low-level tier units for now, but once these are going to scale up, they are going to be a problem. And then I am going to add in another surge alloy facility over here. As you can see, I removed the air unit production that was already in here, because I have all my monos, I have all my polys, and that should be enough for now. That means I'm going to focus on some different units to produce. In the last level, I built some of tier 3 air units, which actually were pretty nice. I also built some of these fortresses, which honestly didn't really impress me that much. I think these are more intended to attack the enemy rather than defend yourself against it. So I think it's next up for the crawlers. The Spyrockets seem to be pretty nice, considering they have lasers, which don't only damage the enemy, but they're also going to repair themselves in the process. That sounds like a pretty good thing. Now let me actually check the range on these things. The range almost 9. If I compare that with the Atrax, yeah, that is a lot less actually. So these are a bit more close tier units, I guess, or like close combat units compared to the other ones. But I don't know, let's just try them out. Now, I want a new design for my unit production because honestly, it started to be a bit of a pain filling all the resources in, so I want to see if I can be smarter about that. Now, I know the trick with the unloaders being able to unload between buildings like I've been doing over here, because the graphite, for example, and especially the silicon, is used in pretty much every step of the production process, so maybe we can use that to our advantage to make something that's a little bit more compact and neat looking, or more importantly, easier to put down and use, because that's my main issue with them. And if we can do that, then we might be able to do that for all the different types of units as well. So I don't know, how about something like this? This is pretty neat and compact. It's probably not the best way to do it, but what I really like about this is that I only have to feed in silicon in one place. It's being transported from here to here to here to here. So all of this actually gets silicon from a single belt. The other materials only have to be fed in once as well. And I can actually pretty much just copy paste this layout for all the different types of units. Literally just copy pasting the build. Wow. Oh, sorry, I was a little bit distracted there. These things are awesome. I've seen them at the enemy's camp, of course, a little bit, but I didn't realize they were this big. This is actually pretty fun. Anyway, what I was trying to say is that the layout is exactly the same, even for the air units. All I need to do is just feed in different items. So you can see I changed in the layout the coal to lead, because if I want to produce, for example, a polys, I do need to make sure I have lead coming in here. But other than that, it's the exact same layout, and you can see how easy this is to set up now. So I'm really happy with that. And I guess that means that for now the main thing I need to do is just keep adding to my defense. Now the silicon is being heavily drained by all my unit production, but of course the unit production by itself is also defense, so it's not really a problem. I could start producing more types of units other than these two as well, but that is just going to be bottlenecked by my production, so that doesn't make a lot of sense. But other than that, yeah, I think we should be fine. Again, famous last words. But I'm just gonna keep adding some of these turrets to the mix. There's no reason not to, honestly. But I do have to say, all those lasers burning is really satisfying. I am even... It's also deafening, by the way. I'm hoping that this doesn't come through the audio a little bit too much. But yeah, even with the lasers burning, I am still at the surplus of power. I am storing up a massive amount as well, so I'm just building batteries now in several different places, so I can't run into the situation again that some of my reserves get blown up and then everything is completely gone. But other than that, yes, working like intended, I should say. That said, I can't really resist making some more blueprints now. I am having some fun and have some time to wait. And this is a blueprint that actually makes graphite from water only. It's not super efficient in terms of how much energy we're consuming to do that, but I have plenty of power now. And yeah, you can literally just make graphite out of water, which is interesting. I am making spore pots, I am making those into oil, I am making that into coal, and the coal into graphite along with some water along the way. So that's an interesting recipe. And while I'm at it, why not use a very similar setup to make some more coal and use some of that slag again to make more sand and then make some pyrite. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having pyrite available, so we might as well use it. Because, you know, some of these lasers are great, but it's even more fun if you have some additional fireworks to go along with that to soften the enemy up. So, yeah, this is a very impressive amount of ripples in the background that I'm now going to fuel with all that pyrite production. However, we can also make blast compound, I believe it's called. Let's see if we can turn some of the pyrite into that. Which, as it turns out, is really easy once you already have the pyrite production, because all you need to do is add in some spore pots, which are super easy to produce, assuming you have water. And as you can see, I have all the blast compound coming in that I'm ever going to need. I'm just mixing it up with the pyrite itself, because honestly it doesn't really matter what we're using in terms of ammunition. And yeah, this is shaping up to be a pretty nice defensive line. Although I do have to say the amount of health mostly that the enemy is bringing in is substantial. So I still have 17 waves to go, and my walls are actually getting fairly damaged in the process of defeating the enemy. So scaling my defenses up might not be the worst idea ever. Okay, so between the double line of ripples I have over here, the meltdowns that I added, the segments I added in between, the cyclones that I have defending my base here and down south here, all water boosted and stuff like that, I'm assuming that that should be enough to hold off the Guardian wave that is going to come in about 10 minutes. If it is not, and it very might not be, considering what happened a few levels ago, I'm going to have a massive problem. Although in this case I should not have any power issues. I'm actually just going to build some additional power stations just because, and I can always add more ripples to the mix in case I need, or some more meltdowns. Okay, remember I said something about famous last words? Look at what just happened to my core. I'm not even sure how it happened. It's probably just some of the pyrite I was importing that exploded. But yeah, this is a very nasty way of losing a level. If this blows up because of all that fire, that just counts as well. Okay, well, I saved the base, luckily, with the help of a couple of wave towers and stuff like that, but yeah, that was a lot closer than I would have liked, and more importantly, it cost me several minutes to do that, so in the meanwhile, I haven't actually been improving on my base defense. So yeah, this is actually turning into an exciting game after all. Well, I can say I was definitely stressing to get ready for the boss, and then I just found out that the boss are 2 flying units. So yeah, that is going to be really interesting. Let's see if I can get some damage going from the side. Do these things fire at flying units? I actually don't know. Let's find out, and if not, well, at least they're going to get in the way. Honestly, this is not going too bad. Okay then, that went a lot better than I thought it would, but look at all my tier 3 units about to blow up, but then again, actually the entire base is intact, I think. I was still working on getting some more anti-air defense going. I was actually kind of expecting this to happen already. And look at that, I even managed to break everything in the process because, well, that is definitely not what that is supposed to look like in terms of my water. But luckily that water is only going to go into my ripples, so my it's just a little bit less DPS basically. Okay, this is me ranting because I was actually really worried there for a moment. But if you are still here after all that ranting, you are awesome, and I do hope to catch you in the next one.